It is just about a week after the inauguration of our new president, and I thought it might be nice to revisit some of the inaugural poems that have been recited at various presidents' inaugurations. You may have been as moved as I was by the poem that we heard just about a week and a half ago by Amanda Gorman. She is the Youth Poet Laureate of the United States, and she's the first ever of these. We've had plenty of Poet Laureates before, Poets Laureate, I should say. It's a poetry program, I should get my grammar right. Amanda Gorman wrote this poem not for the inauguration of a president, but for the inaugural reading of the Poet Laureate Tracy K. Smith at the Library of Congress. And this one's called In This Place, an American Lyric. There's a poem in this place, in the footfalls, in the halls, in the quiet beat of the seats. It is here, at the curtain of the day, where America writes a lyric you must whisper to say. There's a poem in this place, in the heavy grace, the lined face of this noble building, collections burned and reborn twice. There's a poem in Boston's Copley Square, where protest chants tear through the air like sheets of rain, where love of the many swallows hatred of the few. There's a poem in Charlottesville where tiki torches string a ring of flame tight round the wrist of night, where men so white they gleam blue seem like statues, where men heap that long wax burning even higher, where heather higher blooms forever in a meadow of resistance. There's a poem in the great sleeping giant of Lake Michigan, defiantly raising its big blue head to Milwaukee and Chicago. A poem begun long ago, blazed into frozen soil, strutting upward and aglow. There's a poem in Florida, in East Texas, where streets swell into a nexus of rivers, cows afloat like mottled buoys in the brown, where courage is now so common that the 23-year-old Jesus Contreras rescues people from floodwaters. There's a poem in Los Angeles, yawning wide as the Pacific tide, where a single mother swelters in a windowless classroom teaching black and brown students in Watts to spell out their thoughts, so her daughter might write this poem for you. There's a lyric in California, where thousands of students march for blocks, undocumented and unafraid, where my friend Rosa finds the power to blossom in deadlock, her spirit the bedrock of her community. She knows hope is like a stubborn ship gripping a dock, a truth that you can't stop a dreamer or knock down a dream. How could this not be her city, su nación, our country, our America, our American lyric to write? A poem by the people, the poor, the Protestant, the Muslim, the Jew, the native, the immigrant, the black, the brown, the blind, the brave, the undocumented and undeterred, the woman, the man, the non-binary, the white, the trans, the ally to all of the above, and more. Tyrants fear the poet. Now that we know it, we can't blow it. We owe it to show it, not slow it, although it hurts to sow it when the world skirts below it. Hope, we must bestow it, like a wick in the poet, so it can grow lit, bringing with it stories to rewrite, the story of a Texas city depleted but not defeated, a history written that need not be repeated, a nation composed but not yet completed. There's a poem in this place, a poem in America, a poem in every American who rewrites this nation, who tells a story worthy of being told on this minnow of an earth to breathe hope into a palimpsest of time. A poet in every American who sees that our poem penned doesn't mean our poem's end. There's a place where this poem dwells. It is here, it is now, in the yellow song of dawn's bell, where we write an American lyric we are just beginning to tell. Richard Blanco wrote One Today for President Barack Obama's inauguration, January 21st, 2013. One sun rose on us today, kindled over our shores, peeking over the Smokies, greeting the faces of the Great Lakes, spreading a simple truth across the Great Plains, then charging across the Rockies. One light, waking up rooftops under each one, a story told by our silent gestures moving behind windows. My face, your face, millions of faces in morning's mirrors, each one yawning to life, crescendoing into our day. Yellow, pencil yellow school buses, the rhythm of traffic lights, fruit stands, apples, limes and oranges arrayed like rainbows begging our praise. Silver trucks heavy with oil or paper, bricks or milk, teeming over highways alongside us, on our way to clean tables, read ledgers, or save lives. To teach geometry, or ring up groceries as my mother did for 20 years so I could write this poem. All of us, as vital as the one light we move through, the same light on blackboards with lessons for the day, equations to solve, history to question, or atoms imagined. The I have a dream, we keep dreaming, or the impossible vocabulary of sorrow that won't explain the empty desks of 20 children marked absent today and forever. Many prayers, but one light, breathing color into stained glass windows, into the faces of bronze statues, warmth onto the steps of our museums and park benches, as mothers watch children slide into the day. One ground, our ground, rooting us to every stalk of corn, every head of wheat sown by sweat and hands, hands gleaning coal, or planting windmills in deserts and hilltops that keep us warm. Hands digging trenches, routing pipes and cables, hands as worn as my father's, cutting sugar cane so my brother and I could have books and shoes. The dust of farms and deserts, cities and plains, mingled by one wind, our breath. Breathe. Hear it through the day's gorgeous din of honking cabs, buses launching down avenues, the symphony of footsteps, guitars, and screeching subways, the unexpected songbird of your clothesline. Hear squeaky playground swings, trains whistling, or whispers across cafe tables. Hear the doors we open for each other all day, saying hello, shalom, buongiorno, howdy, namaste, or buenos dias, in the language my mother taught me. In every language spoken into one wind, carrying our lives without prejudice, as these words break from my lips. One sky. Since the Appalachians and Sierras claimed their majesty, and the Mississippi and Colorado worked their way to the sea, thank the work of our hands, weaving steel into bridges, finishing one more report for the boss on time, stitching another wound or uniform, the first brush stroke on a portrait, or the last floor of the Freedom Tower, jutting into a sky that yields to our resilience. One sky, toward which we sometimes lift our eyes tired from work, some days guessing at the weather of our lives, some days giving thanks for a love that loves you back, sometimes praising a mother who knew how to give, or forgiving a father who couldn't give what you wanted. We head home, through the gloss of rain or weight of snow, or the plum blush of dusk, but always home, always under one sky, our sky, and always one moon, like a silent drum tapping on every rooftop and every window of one country, all of us facing the stars. Hope, a new constellation, waiting for us to map it, waiting for us to name it together. Maya Angelou wrote this poem for the inauguration of Bill Clinton. It's called On the Pulse of Morning. A rock, a river, a tree, hosts to species long departed, marked the mastodon, the dinosaur who left dried tokens of their sojourn here on our planet floor. Any broad alarm of their hastening doom is lost in the gloom of dust and ages. But today, the rock cries to us clearly, forcefully, "Come, you may stand upon my back and face your distant destiny. But seek no haven in my shadow. I will give you no resting place down there. You, created only a little lower than the angels, have crouched too long in the bruising darkness, have lain too long, face down in ignorance, your mouths spilling words armed for slaughter. The rock cries out to us today, you may stand upon me, but do not hide your face. Across the wall of the world, a river sings a beautiful song. It says, come, rest here by my side. Each of you, a bordered country, delicate and strangely made proud, yet thrusting perpetually under siege. Your armed struggles for profit have left colors of waste upon my shore, currents of debris upon my breast. Yet today I call you to my riverside, if you will study war no more. Come, clad in peace, and I will sing the songs the Creator gave to me when I and the tree and the rock were one. Before cynicism was a bloody sear across your brow, and when you yet knew you still knew nothing, the river sang and sings on. There is a true yearning to respond to the singing river and the wise rock. So say the Asian, the Hispanic, the Jew, the African, the Native American, the Sioux, the Catholic, the Muslim, the French, the Greek, the Irish, the rabbi, the priest, the sheik, the gay, the straight, the preacher, the privileged, the homeless, the teacher. They all hear the speaking of the tree. They hear the first and last of every tree speak to humankind today. Come to me, here beside the river. Plant yourself beside the river. Each of you, descendant of some pressed-on traveler, has been paid for. You who gave me my first name, you Pawnee, Apache, Seneca, you Cherokee nation who rested with me, then forced on bloody feet left me to the employment of other seekers, desperate for gain, starving for gold. You, the Turk, the Arab, the Swede, the German, the Eskimo, the Scot. You, the Ashanti, the Yoruba, the Kru, bought, stole, stolen, arriving on the nightmare, praying for a dream. Here, root yourselves beside me. I am that tree planted by the river, which will not be moved. I, the rock, I, the river, I, the tree, I am yours. Your passages have been paid. Lift up your faces. You have a piercing need for this bright morning dawning for you. History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived but if faced with courage, need not be lived again. Lift up your eyes upon this day breaking for you. Give birth again to the dream. Women, children, men, take it into the palm of your hands. Mold it into the shape of your most private need. Sculpt it into the image of your most public self. Lift up your hearts. Each new hour holds new chances for a new beginning. Do not be wedded forever to fear, yoked eternally to brutishness. The horizon leans forward, offering you space to place new steps of change. Here on the pulse of this fine day, you may have the courage to look up and out upon me, the rock, the river, the tree, your country. No less to Midas than the mendicant, no less to you now than the mastodon then. Here on the pulse of this new day, you may have the grace to look up and out and into your sister's eyes and into your brother's face, your country, and say simply, very simply, with hope, good morning. Robert Frost became the first poet to recite a poem at a presidential inauguration, at least the first one that I know of, and at the inauguration of John F. Kennedy. He recited a poem different from the one he had intended. It was not the one that he wrote for the occasion. It was windy, it was bright, it was difficult for him to read the paper that was in his hand, and so instead he recited from memory an older poem of his, but it seemed the perfect one for the occasion. The Gift Outright by Robert Frost. The land was ours before we were the land's. She was our land more than 100 years before we were her people. She was ours in Massachusetts, in Virginia, but we were England's, still colonials, possessing what we were unpossessed by what we now no more possessed. Something we were withholding made us weak until we found out that it was ourselves we were withholding from our land of living, and forthwith found salvation in surrender. Such as we were, we gave ourselves outright. The deed of gift was many deeds of war, to the land vaguely realizing westward, but still unstoried, artless, unenhanced, such as she was, such as she will become. Amanda Gorman, the country's first youth poet laureate, read The Hill We Climb at the inauguration of Joe Biden. The hill we climb. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always justice. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother, can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge a union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true, that even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together, victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is, the promise to glade the hill we climb, if only we dare. It's because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust. For while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption we feared at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe, now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens. But one thing is certain. If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left with. Every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the West. We will rise from the windswept Northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked South. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover. And every known nook of our nation and every corner called our country, our people diverse and beautiful will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light. If only we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it. Thank you for joining me for this program of inaugural poems. There are more. You can find them if you search for inaugural poetry on the web. There will be more in the future, and each one will be a snapshot of the time in which the inauguration has happened and the poem is read. And each one will also contain within it something of a dream, something of the possibilities that the poet sees, something of the energy that drives us forward as a nation, that continues to inspire us as a people. My hope for you is that such poems will rise up within you, that the words that others have written may settle in and become in you the words that rise up as your own. It is a powerful and wondrous thing for us to realize that as a nation we have weathered many a storm because of who we are, because of who we have been called to be. I am grateful for this nation, for all of its messiness and all that rises out of it. I'm grateful for you because you contain within yourself the seeds of who we are becoming. Let those seeds sprout, be watered and nourished, and passed on to nourish and feed the next generation. I wish you peace.